Good morning. We have two passages left in the book of Philippians. We'll hit Philippians 4:10 through 19 this morning, and then Philippians 4:20 through 23 tomorrow morning, and then we'll be done. But we are not finished with important elements of the book of Philippians yet. In fact, as we said in the beginning of our study, what we are about to hit in Philippians 4:10 through 19 is one of the primary reasons that he's even writing the letter at all. Paul is writing these verses specifically to thank the Philippians for a gift that they have sent him. Apparently, the Philippians had sent a financial gift to Paul to sustain his ministry, and he is certainly thankful for that, and these verses are him expressing that thankfulness for that gift, which is a primary reason for him sending this letter in the first place. So let's read through it, and we will dive in. Paul writes this: "But I rejoiced in the Lord greatly that now at last you have revived your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned before, but you lacked opportunity. Not that I speak from want, for I have learned to be content in whatever circumstances I am in. I know how to get along with humble means, and I also know how to live in prosperity. In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of being filled and going hungry, of both having abundance and suffering need. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. Nevertheless, you have done well to share with me in my afflictions. You yourselves know, Philippians, that at the first preaching of the gospel after I left Macedonia, no church shared with me in the manner of giving and receiving, but you alone. For even in Thessalonica, you sent a gift more than once for my needs. Not that I seek the gift itself, but I seek the profit, which increases to your account. But I have received everything in full, and have an abundance. I am amply supplied. Having received from Epaphroditus what you sent, a fragrant aroma, an acceptable sacrifice, well-pleasing to God. And my God will supply all of your needs according to his riches in glory in Christ Jesus." Okay, so Philippians 4:10 through 19. The Philippians have sent Paul a financial gift, and he is expressing his thanks as he closes down this letter. He says, "I rejoiced in the Lord greatly." Because of the gift that they sent, it has caused Paul immense joy. Remember, Paul just called the Philippians in the last passage. Remember this? Sorry, I didn't clean it up at all. But in verse 4, Paul called them to rejoice in the Lord. And again, I say rejoice. And in verse 9, he said, "Follow my example. What you have seen in me, practice these things." And so we see some of that come to fruition in Philippians 4:10 through 19, where he just told them that he was joyful in all things, that they needed to be joyful in all things. And now he's saying, I have been joyful in all things. And he's setting that example as he's thanking them for their gift when he says, "I rejoiced in the Lord greatly, that now at last you have revived your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned before, but you lacked opportunity." So this statement, "you have revived your concern for me," that is Paul's way of saying you sent a gift. You have revived the concern that you have. You've shown me physical evidence of this concern that you have. Now, Paul knows that they've always had concern for him. He knows that this is a close and loving relationship. He says, you were concerned before, but you lacked opportunity. There wasn't a need for you to send a gift before, and now there is. And when the opportunity came, you immediately stepped up to the plate. And for that, I am exceedingly joyful and thankful for what you have done. So Paul is expressing this thankfulness, and then there's several different elements that he expresses throughout these verses. The first, in verses 11 through 13, he starts to tell them that while he's thankful for the gift, he says it was unnecessary. It was unnecessary, which doesn't mean he's rejecting the gift. He's just saying you didn't have to do that. Look at what he says in verse 11. He says, "Not that I speak from want. I don't need or necessarily even want this. I'm not desperately desiring to receive this gift. It was timely, and I'm super thankful for it. But I'm not speaking out of this burning desire to have more money. It was an unnecessary gift." And he expounds on that by saying, "I have learned," and this is so critical in what Paul is communicating here. "I have learned to be content in whatever circumstances I am in. So he's saying, I didn't have this burning desire to have more money because I've learned to be content no matter what my circumstances are. If I've had lots of money or if I've had no money, I've learned that I can be content no matter what. Look at verse 12. He expounds on that. I know how to get along with humble means, that is having no money, and I also know how to live in prosperity, that is having lots of money. So Paul says, I am content no matter my circumstances. I'm thankful for the gift, but I want you to know that I would have been content even without it. It wasn't necessary for my contentment. He continues, in any and every circumstance, I have learned this secret. I've learned this secret of being filled and going hungry. Paul has learned a secret. What is that secret? Let's keep reading. He says, I've learned the secret of being filled and going hungry, of both having abundance and suffering need. You see what Paul does through all of these? He is giving all of these different contrasts. Suffering need is the opposite of having abundance. Being hungry is the opposite of being filled. Prosperity is the opposite of humble means. All of these demonstrating whatever circumstances I am in, whether it's humble means, prosperity, filled, hungry, abundance, suffering, need. He says, I have learned the secret to handling all of those things in contentment. And it is in revealing that secret that the all-famous verse of Philippians 4:13 is spoken. Paul says, I can do all things through him who strengthens me. What's the secret to getting along no matter whether we have lots of money or no money, lots of food or no food, no matter my circumstances? What's the secret to contentment? Paul's answer is, I can do all things through Christ. I can be content in any circumstance because I have Christ. It's important that we make a note here that Philippians 4:13 is not really a verse about athletics. There may be some implications, but typically what you see when someone scores a touchdown and says, "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." That's not what Paul is talking about here. He's not saying I can do literally any physical feat because I have Christ. He's saying I can be righteous. I can be content no matter my circumstance. Those are the all things. In any circumstance, in all things, I can be content through Christ who is at work within me. So Paul says, ultimately, this is saying, I didn't need your gift for my contentment. I can be content no matter what. It was unnecessary for my own spiritual well-being, but I'm so thankful for the gift. And he continues in verse 14 to express that. He says, nevertheless, you have done well. You've done well. Even though it was unnecessary, you have done incredibly well to share with me in my affliction. You yourselves know that at the first preaching of the gospel after I left Macedonia, no church shared with me in the manner of giving and receiving, but you alone. So what Paul is communicating here is that the Philippians are the only ones who have done this. He says, no church shared with me in the manner of giving and receiving, but you alone. No church. You are the only ones to do this. In other words, what Paul is communicating in these verses is that the gift, it was not only unnecessary for spiritual well-being, but it was uncommon. Other churches weren't doing this. The Philippians were incredibly gracious in doing something that other churches weren't doing to be a blessing and an aid to Paul. He says, you alone have done this. And this wasn't the first time they've done it. Look at verse 16. For even in Thessalonica, you sent a gift more than once for my needs. You've done this multiple times. I'm so thankful for your care for my own well-being that you have taken upon yourself more than once. He does give a funny comment in verse 17. He says, by the way, I don't seek the gift itself. Again, this is connected to what was said before in verses 11 through 13. I don't need the gift for my own spiritual well-being. I'm not seeking after the gift, but I am incredibly happy and rejoicing in the midst of this because of the profit which increases to your account. Paul says, one of the reasons I'm so joyful about this gift is because it gives a profit not just to me, but to you. He's speaking of a spiritual profit here. You are storing up treasures in heaven, maybe one way of saying this. You are demonstrating the genuineness of your faith and your commitment to the gospel, and that is a profit to you more than it is to me. And so he says, I'm thankful for the gift, but I don't seek the gift itself. I'm thankful for what it demonstrates in you, which is so true in giving, that often it may bless someone, but also there's blessing to you as a giver in what it demonstrates about yourself, and the obedience that you have the opportunity to demonstrate and follow Christ in as we give. So that's certainly something to keep in your mind as you think through giving, especially as some of you begin to develop an income. And this isn't just giving to the church. Remember, the Philippians were a church. This is giving to gospel work in an individual who was taking the gospel to other churches. And so certainly a good example for us to follow that the Philippians set here. Well, Paul continues in verse 18. When he says, I have received everything, this is very logistical. He says, I've received it. I've received everything in full, and I have an abundance. I am amply supplied. In other words, what you have given me, it was sufficient. What you have given me, I received it, and it is enough. I am amply supplied. I have all that I need, having received from Epaphroditus what you sent. He refers to their gift as a fragrant aroma, an acceptable sacrifice, well-pleasing to God. All of these are terms of offerings. In other words, when the Philippians gave to Paul, they were giving and offering to God a fragrant aroma, an acceptable sacrifice that's well-pleasing to God. And then he closes by saying in verse 19, my God will supply all your needs according to his riches in glory in Christ Jesus. So even though they have just supplied for his needs, he responds by saying, I know that my God is going to take care of your needs as well. You have taken care of me, and God is going to take care of you. So he closes these comments by saying, God will care for your needs. God will care for your needs. So these are Paul's comments. He's thanking them for a gift. He's incredibly thankful, certainly an example of thankfulness that we would do well to model here. But also there's so much in here about the self-sacrifice that the Philippians model in giving. Paul is clearly blessed by it. And I would also call us to circle verses 11 through 13 and understand what those verses are communicating. Philippians 4:13 is often taken out of context. What it's saying is we can be content no matter what because we know Christ and he is at work in us. He is strengthening us. And so let's seek to be content as Paul was content. Let's seek to be givers as the Philippians were givers. And let's seek to be thankful as Paul expressed thankfulness for the kindness of others. Thanks for tuning in this morning. We will pick up our last passage in Philippians tomorrow morning. We'll see you then.